Hello, welcome to day 331. Today, I want to focus on what's coming. You just finished NTI Galatians, and you're going to be moving into NTI Ephesians. But some of the practice that's coming up in this coming week is still going to be from NTI Galatians. So you'll be kind of in both at the same time, NTI Galatians and NTI Ephesians. Let me share with you a little bit about what is coming up. So first of all, on day 332, you will listen to the first 16 minutes of a teaching on NTI Ephesians. The teaching is longer than that, but you'll listen to the rest of it on day 333. So we've split the teaching up into 2 different days. Also on day 332, you'll have this assignment. Select something or someone that needs your forgiveness. Practice forgiveness as it is taught in NTI Galatians 6. You may want to reread NTI Galatians 6 as you go through the forgiveness process. And of course, I'm sure you remember from the audio that you heard on NTI Galatians chapter 6 that it's really important to shift out of your wrong mind, or the wrong mind that holds the grievance, or we could call it a judgment, holds the judgment, and shift into your right mind, that which is willing to forgive, or that which is willing to see the judgment, let go of the judgment. And that's why NTI Galatians chapter 6 really teaches that you take some time to focus on your willingness first. One thing that I want to share is that I've done a lot of forgiveness in the way that NTI Galatians chapter 6 taught. But for the most part, I've always done mine through a journaling process. I write. In fact, maybe not even for the most part always, maybe always I journal. So I thought I'd take a moment to teach you a little bit about how to journal with inner wisdom in order to see with clarity, and in order to practice forgiveness or letting go of judgment. So whenever I sit down to journal, the very first thing that I do is I set the intention. This is kind of like NTI Galatians 6 says, focus on your willingness. I focus on my willingness to hear from inner wisdom. I focus on my willingness to go beyond my thinking mind where the grievance is held, where the judgment is held, and reach that which is beyond the thinking mind. You know, we could call it Holy Spirit, inner wisdom, which can show me clarity regarding this. So that's the first thing I do, is I set the intention, and I might set that intention in writing. You know, for example, I might say, I'm taking this within because I want clarity regarding this situation. My interest is truth, or something like that as I start writing. Some of you may want to start with a prayer before you begin writing. But some way set the intention, set the stage. Sometimes when I'm writing with a grievance, especially back in the olden days, there's a lot going on in the mind. And so the first thing I want to do is empty my mind. And I do that by putting everything that's in my mind on paper. So for example, I might write, I'm actually afraid to look at this. I'm afraid to see where I've made a mistake. I find it hard to believe the other person isn't to blame. I find myself telling this person off in the mind. I tell him he's a jerk. I tell him to mind his own business. I tell him to leave me alone. I'm afraid of what other people will think of me if I continue to let him treat me this way. et cetera, just whatever's going on. And the reason for writing this out on paper is literally to get it out of your mind onto paper. You're just putting out all of your thoughts about it. And you don't need to repeat the thoughts. You're not putting them down to go deeper into the story or deeper into the believing. You just want to get all of that out of your mind so that you're opening the space in order to hear from clarity. Sometimes you won't need to do that. So sometimes the second step, you'll be able to go directly from the first step of setting the intention to the third step, which is going to be asking an open question. But sometimes, again, if your mind is spinning, you will need to take the time to get your thoughts out on paper. Now, the third step, again, is asking an open question. And you always want to make sure that your questions are open and not closed. So an example of a closed question would be, should I confront him or should I let this go? Instead, a better way to ask a question, very, very open. And by the way, that was closed because it only had two options. A better way to ask a question is to make it as open as possible so the answer can be anything at all that inner wisdom wants to give you. So you haven't limited it by your question. So for example, a better way to ask the question might be, I am upset, so I know something in my mind is causing this upset. What do I need to see in my mind? Another open question might be, what would you like to share with me about this situation? That's very open. What would you, infinite wisdom, like to share with me about this situation? As open as you can make the question, the better. And then step number 4 is to just begin writing. Often when I ask a question like, what would you share with me about this situation? I'll hear the first few words of a sentence. And as I start writing those first few words of the sentence, more will begin to come. Don't judge what comes, just write it. You don't know where it's going until you write it. So write and see what clarity comes about the situation, about the grievance, about the judgment. Point number 5 is it's okay to ask additional questions. So if some clarity is coming, but then let's say it says something like, it's in your best interest to accept him as he is. And you think, I don't know how to do that. Then you can ask inner wisdom, how do I accept him as he is? Right? If you get some kind of guidance and you feel strong resistance to that guidance, you could ask, what do I do with my resistance to your guidance? Right? It's okay to have an interactive conversation in your journal with inner wisdom. And then number 6, you just want to keep writing until you feel complete. So when you practice forgiveness on day 332, you may want to, first of all, take the time to read NTI Galatians chapter 6 again, at least skim it and slow down and read the parts that you feel guided to slow down and read. But then you might want to practice doing this through a journaling process. On day 333, you're going to have a different walkabout practice. This is based on NTI Ephesians. It says, realize that if you give a lot of attention to something, you are praying for it with passion. Again, that's based on NTI Ephesians, which you have not yet read. Notice the thoughts you give attention to, not at the story level, but at the vibration level. For example, is it judgment? Is it fear? Is it acceptance? Ask yourself, is this what I want to receive? If not, let it go and place your attention with your spiritual purpose. Let me share my screen and just give you a little bit of a heads up about what this practice is about. This is the 4 principles of God, which I've shown you a few times. The 4th principle of God is manifestation, the world, right? The world and everything that happens in the world. NTI Ephesians is about the 3rd principle of God, which I call the creative principle, which is how this world and everything that happens in the world gets made, how it gets created. And what NTI Ephesians teaches is, even though we think we're humans in the world, this 4th principle of God, we think we're humans in the world, we're actually consciousness, the 2nd principle of God. Our attention is a divine power. What we give our attention to in some way creates manifestation, creates something within the 4th principle of God. NTI Ephesians calls this, it's like praying for, whatever I give my attention to. So if I'm giving my attention to, oh my God, he is such a jerk, I don't ever want to see him again, blah, 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 all of this grievance energy. We could even call that attack energy. It's a mental attack. Then it says I'm praying for grievances, attack, conflict, because I'm giving my divine attention to a story about grievances, attack, conflict. And as a result, grievances, attack, conflict get created. Those types of stories, those types of scenarios get created in the world, and they come back into my experience as well. So the question in the exercise then realize that if you give a lot of attention to something, you're praying for it with passion. We could also say you're creating it through the 3rd principle of God, through the creative principle. So it's going to show up in the 4th principle in the world somehow. If you give a lot of attention to something, it will be manifest in some way. And so you're asked to notice what you're giving attention to. And not necessarily at the story level, because exact stories don't necessarily manifest. They can, but that's not the primary way that creation happens. It's more the vibrational energy. If you're worried a lot, if you're focused on fear, that creates fearful scenarios. If it's anger, attack, hatred, that creates those types of scenarios. If it's unworthiness, guilt, defense, that creates those types of situations. So what you want to do with this exercise when you come to day 333 is you want to pay attention to the vibrational level, or the kind of the under content of your thought rather than the story. Notice what it is. This is, for example, this is blame. This is blame, right? And then say, is blame really what I want to receive into my experience? Because again, you kind of cast it out into the world and it manifests in some way, but it always comes back. So is this the type of experience that I want to receive? And then if blame is not the type of experience I really want to receive, then what I want to do is I want to let that go and refocus myself on my spiritual aspiration. On day 334, you'll actually begin to read NTI Ephesians, and you'll do a very similar exercise, right? Notice when you give a lot of attention to something. Notice the content, the vibration of the thought. Is this what you want to receive? If not, let go and place your attention with your spiritual aspiration. When you place your attention with your spiritual aspiration, you make a call out to consciousness. That's basically saying, what I want the most is this. Whether your spiritual aspiration is to be only love, whether your spiritual aspiration is to free yourself from suffering, whether your spiritual aspiration is to awaken to reality, right? Whatever you give your attention to, that is your call to consciousness. That is what you are sending out, and that is what you will receive back. So when you're focusing on your spiritual aspiration, that's your call to consciousness. On day 335, you will read NTI Ephesians chapter 2, and you'll continue to do the same type of exercise, but you're also going to get your assignment that you will do sometime this weekend. And that's going to be returning back to practicing forgiveness in the way that NTI Galatians chapter 6 taught. So you'll find another situation or person that you want to forgive. And then maybe again, do it in this journaling process, following the general direction of NTI Galatians chapter 6. So you won't be listening to an audio or a video as your weekend assignment. You'll do another forgiveness practice. On day 336, you'll read NTI Ephesians chapter 3. And again, you're going to be noticing the content or vibration of your thoughts and asking, is this what I want to receive? You'll also, of course, have a guided meditation on that day. And then on day 337, you will listen to an audio instead of reading. It will be an audio teaching from NTI Ephesians chapter 3. And then that same exercise, right, is watch the vibration, the content of your thoughts. I'm focused on attack, defense. Is attack and defense the type of experience I want to receive? If not, let this go and focus on my spiritual aspiration. So again, I'm going to share my screen again. This week, what we're really focusing on is this third principle of God with NTI Ephesians. We're realizing that, again, we are not people in a world, which would be the fourth principle of God. It appears that way. But what we actually are is consciousness, the second principle of God. So our attention is divine. Our attention creates. And so when we think we're people and we're living in the world and experience of people, and we're giving attention as people, what we're really doing is creating manifestation. And then we always receive what we create. So we're going to start practicing discernment. Is this what I want to create? Is this what I want to receive? You can even ask yourself, is this what I want to cast out into the universe to become manifest? And if not, you will shift your attention, because it's your divine attention that is that third principle of God. This also ties into the forgiveness practice from NTI Galatians chapter 6, because again, if I'm focusing on my grievance with someone or something, it could be the government, it could be a corporation, it could be a new law, right? It could be anything. But if I'm focusing on my grievance of something, that energy, that grievance energy, that attack, that resistance, that hate, whatever it is, that's the energy I'm sending out to become manifest. And that's what I'm receiving back. So the forgiveness process is another way of learning to take my attention off that which I do not want to create. This is so important. This is the mistake that most people make in the world. Seeing themselves as people in a world, not understanding that they are divine consciousness. If there's something they want to end, some particular thing like racism or abuse, child abuse or animal abuse or abuse of the environment or police brutality or, you name it, right? COVID-19, anything at all. What they actually do is they give a lot of attention to that thing. And they don't understand by giving so much attention to it, by talking to it, by talking about it, by focusing on it, by reading articles about it. They're actually a part of the creation process of that and other things with a similar energy. So again, we want to bring ourselves back to focus on our spiritual aspiration. By focusing on our spiritual aspiration, we help to heal the world and heal ourselves. Because we aren't people in a world. We're consciousness creating through our divine attention. And that's what NTI Ephesians is all about. And we'll be looking at NTI Ephesians for the next couple of weeks. Again, you'll look at the first 3 chapters in this upcoming week. So I hope that you found this helpful for what's coming up. And I will see you again next week. Bye.